After a quick call with my sister, she forgot to hang up and I heard her trash talking me to my family. He thinks paying our mortgage makes him important. They laughed. I didn't respond until mortgage day came. I, 32M, never expected a simple phone call would change everything between me and my family. What started as a routine check-in with my sister turned into the most eye-opening 15 minutes of my life. The call was supposed to be quick. My sister had asked me to confirm the mortgage payment for our family home, the house where our parents still lived, the house I'd been quietly paying for over the past 3 years. After our father's stroke left him unable to work and our mother became his full-time caregiver, I stepped in without hesitation. No family meetings, no discussions about who should contribute what. I just started making the payments. I told my sister the payment would go through as usual on the 15th, just like every month. She thanked me, and I thought she hung up. But she didn't. What I heard next made my blood run cold. My sister's voice came through crystal clear as she walked into what sounded like the living room where the rest of my family was gathered. She announced that I'd confirmed the payment, then added something that hit me like a physical blow. She told them I was still acting like some big shot just because I handled the mortgage, mimicking my voice in an exaggerated, pompous tone. The laughter that followed was worse than any argument we'd ever had. My mother's voice joined in, saying I probably thought I was so generous and important. My younger brother chimed in, joking that I probably expected them to bow down and thank me every month. Even my father, the man whose medical bills I'd also been quietly helping with, made some comment about how I always had to be the hero. My sister's voice was the clearest. She said I acted like paying the mortgage made me some kind of family savior, when really, I probably just did it to feel superior to everyone else. The others agreed, building on each other's comments, painting me as this arrogant family member who threw money around to boost his own ego. I sat in my car in complete silence, listening to my entire family tear me apart for something I'd never even mentioned to most of them. For 3 years, I'd simply made sure they had a roof over their heads. I'd never brought it up during family dinners, never used it in arguments, never even told most of them I was doing it. Yet somehow, in their minds, I was this manipulative person using money to control them. The call finally ended when my sister actually hung up, probably 20 minutes after she thought she had. I sat there for another hour, processing what I'd just heard. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and crushed something vital. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't call an emergency family meeting or send angry texts. Instead, I would simply stop. The next mortgage payment was due in 12 days. I decided to let them figure out what my superiority complex was really worth. I spent those 12 days acting completely normal. I showed up to our weekly family dinner, helped my father with his physical therapy exercises, and chatted with everyone as if nothing had changed. Not once did anyone mention the mortgage, the payments, or anything related to the house finances. It was like this massive part of our family's stability was invisible to them. The 15th came and went. I made no payment. 3 days later, my sister called me, her tone noticeably different. She asked if everything was okay with the mortgage payment, mentioning that the bank had called about a missed payment. I told her everything was fine on my end, and that maybe she should check with whoever was supposed to handle it this month. The confusion in her voice was obvious as she insisted that I always handled it. I told her I wasn't sure what she meant and suggested she might want to look into it since it seemed important. Then I hung up. By day 5, my phone was buzzing constantly. My mother called, sounding panicked, asking what was happening with the house payment. I expressed surprise and concern, asking her what she meant about a house payment. When she explained that the bank was threatening late fees, I suggested she contact whoever had been making the payments to see what the problem might be. My brother texted asking if I knew anything about mortgage issues at the house. I responded that I hoped everything worked out and that they'd figure out who was supposed to be handling it. The calls and texts became more desperate as the days passed. Each family member reached out, and each time, I played completely innocent. I expressed concern for their situation and suggested they work together to figure out who should be responsible for such an important expense. When they pressed me directly about whether I had been making the payments, I turned it back on them, asking why they would assume I had been handling such a significant expense without anyone mentioning it. By the end of the second week, my sister showed up at my apartment. She looked exhausted and stressed as she asked me directly to help with the mortgage situation. I listened to her explanation of their financial struggles, nodding sympathetically. When she finished, I asked her if she remembered our last phone conversation. The color drained from her face. She clearly remembered what had happened, what I'd overheard. I told her that conversation had been very enlightening and that it helped me understand how the family really viewed my contributions. She started to apologize, but I stopped her. I explained that according to what I'd heard, I was apparently someone who threw money around just to feel important and superior. I told her that after really thinking about it, I realized they were probably right. Maybe I had been using financial help as some kind of power play. So I decided to stop that behavior entirely. She begged me to reconsider, explaining that they were about to lose the house. The late fees were piling up, and none of them could come up with the full mortgage amount. I listened carefully, then told her how sorry I was that they were going through such a difficult time. I suggested they might want to have a family meeting to discuss who could contribute and how much. When she pressed me about whether I would help, I reminded her of something she'd said during that phone call. She had mentioned that I probably expected them to bow down and thank me every month. I told her she was right. Expecting gratitude for helping family was wrong. So I wouldn't put any of them in that uncomfortable position anymore. The conversation continued for over an hour. She tried every angle, appealing to family loyalty, reminding me of childhood memories, even crying as she described how our parents would lose their home. Through it all, I remained sympathetic but firm. I had learned from our family discussion that my previous approach was problematic, and I was committed to being better. Update 1. By the third week, the entire family was in crisis mode. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings, and my parents were facing the reality of losing their home. My mother called me in tears, begging me to help them understand what had gone wrong with the mortgage payments. I drove over to have a family meeting at their request. Sitting in the living room, where I'd heard them mock me through that phone call, I watched as they struggled to explain their financial situation. My father, still recovering from his stroke, looked confused and frightened. My mother kept apologizing for not understanding the family finances better. My siblings sat quietly, clearly knowing exactly why this was happening, but unable to bring themselves to admit it in front of our parents. I listened to their entire explanation with genuine concern on my face. When they finished, I told them I had no idea they'd been struggling with the mortgage. I asked them to walk me through who had been making the payments and when that arrangement had started. The awkward silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my sister admitted that she thought I had been making the payments, but she wasn't sure why or when it had started. My brother mumbled something about assuming I was handling it. Neither wanted to fully admit what they knew in front of our parents. I expressed surprise and asked why they would think I was responsible for such a large expense. When no one could give a clear answer, I suggested that maybe there had been some miscommunication somewhere along the way. My mother asked me directly if I could help them save the house. I told her I understood their desperation, but that I needed to be honest about my financial situation. I explained that taking on someone else's mortgage would be a massive responsibility, thousands of dollars every month, property taxes, insurance, maintenance costs. I said it would be the kind of thing that would require careful family discussion and clear agreements about expectations and responsibilities. My father asked if I would be willing to help temporarily while they figured out a long-term solution. I told him I'd need to think about it seriously, since it would mean taking on a significant financial burden for an indefinite period. The meeting ended with me promising to consider their situation carefully and get back to them within a few days. As I left, I could see the fear in my parents' eyes and the guilt on my siblings' faces. Update 2. That weekend, I received a call from my sister asking if we could meet privately. She came to my apartment looking like she hadn't slept in days. She immediately started apologizing for what I'd heard on that phone call, admitting that what they'd said was wrong and hurtful. She explained that the family had been talking about me earlier that day, and someone had made a comment about how I seemed to enjoy being the family's financial savior. She said they'd all gotten carried away making jokes, and it had spiraled into something cruel and unfair. She insisted that none of them really believed what they'd said, and that they were just venting frustration about their own financial helplessness. I listened to her entire apology without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her if she could help me understand something. I told her that for 3 years, I'd been making a $2,800 mortgage payment every month, plus helping with utilities and medical expenses when needed. I'd done this without any family discussion, without any formal agreement, and without ever mentioning it or asking for recognition. I asked her to help me figure out where I'd gone wrong in my approach, since clearly my family saw this as some kind of power play or ego trip. She started to protest, but I continued. I explained that after hearing their conversation, I'd spent a lot of time reflecting on my motivations. Maybe I really was doing it for the wrong reasons. Maybe I did expect some kind of special treatment or gratitude. I told her I was genuinely trying to understand what I'd done wrong so I could be better in the future. She broke down crying, admitting that they all knew what I'd been doing for the family and that they were grateful, but that sometimes it made them feel helpless and dependent. She said they'd lashed out because they felt bad about not being able to contribute equally. I told her I appreciated her honesty and that it helped me understand the situation better. But I also explained that learning how my family really felt about my help had been incredibly painful. I thought I was quietly supporting people I loved, but instead I'd apparently been making them feel diminished and resentful. She begged me to give them another chance, promising that things would be different if I resumed helping with the mortgage. I told her that I needed time to think about whether that would be healthy for any of us. Update 3. The foreclosure notice was posted on my parents' house on a Tuesday morning. My mother called me sobbing, saying they had 30 days to bring the mortgage current or they would lose everything. The total amount needed was now over $9,000, including late fees and penalties. I drove over immediately, finding my entire family gathered in a state of panic. My parents looked devastated, and my siblings were frantically trying to figure out if they could scrape together even a portion of the money needed. My brother had gotten approval for a $3,000 personal loan, but the interest rate was crushing. My sister had been calling relatives, trying to borrow money, but could only find commitments for about $1,500. They were still more than $4,000 short, and the deadline was approaching fast. I sat down with them and asked to see all the paperwork from the bank. I reviewed the foreclosure notice, the payment history, and the total amount due. Then I made them an offer. I told them I was willing to bring the mortgage current and resume making payments, but only under specific conditions. First, we would need a formal written agreement about the arrangement, including what would happen if I couldn't continue payments in the future. Second, the family would need to acknowledge exactly what this arrangement meant, that I would be taking on a $2,800 monthly obligation indefinitely, with no guarantee of being able to stop. Most importantly, I told them that if I ever heard anyone in the family discussing this arrangement disrespectfully or suggesting that I was doing it for selfish reasons, I would immediately stop all payments and transfer responsibility back to them. I gave them 24 hours to discuss it and let me know their decision. I made it clear that this was a one-time offer. If they declined or if the arrangement failed in the future, I would never again help with the house. The next evening, my sister called to accept my terms. She said the family had talked extensively, and they understood both the magnitude of what I was offering and the consequences of not appreciating it properly. I paid the $9,000 to bring the mortgage current, and we signed a simple agreement outlining the arrangement. The document stated that I would make monthly payments as a gift to help my parents keep their home, and that the family understood this was a voluntary arrangement that could end at any time. 6 months have passed since then. The mortgage payments continue automatically from my account. Family dinners are still awkward sometimes, but no one has made any jokes about my contributions or suggested I'm doing it for ego. My siblings occasionally ask if there's anything they can do to help with expenses, and they've both started contributing small amounts toward utilities and maintenance. The dynamic has definitely changed. My family seems more aware of the financial realities of keeping the house, and more grateful for help when it's offered. But there's also a distance that wasn't there before, a formality in how we discuss money and responsibilities. I don't regret what I did. They needed to understand that taking someone's help for granted, especially while mocking them for it, has consequences. But I also learned something about myself through this situation. Maybe I had been getting some satisfaction from being the family's financial solution. Maybe there was a small part of me that enjoyed being needed in that way. The difference now is that everyone's expectations are clear. They know I'm choosing to help, and I know they understand what that help actually costs. It's not perfect, but it's honest in a way our previous arrangement never was. Sometimes I wonder if that phone call was the best thing that could have happened to our family, even though it felt devastating at the time. It forced all of us to examine our motivations and expectations. Now when I make that monthly payment, I do it because I want to help my parents keep their home, not because I want to be seen as the family hero. And if I ever hear them laughing about it behind my back again, at least now they'll know exactly what that laughter will cost them.